What do you do when the road you re-on decides where you re-going? When your GPS freezes, the signs make no sense, and a whole town appears like a bruise under the night. This is the story of the place that found me, a town that isn't on maps, that shouldn't be on Earth, and yet it opened its streets and told me to keep driving. If you've ever thought, I'll just take the shortcut, remember this: some roads don't shorten distance, they shorten you. Story set up: I was 2 states into a solo drive I shouldn't have taken, leaving a version of my life behind like a shirt I didn't want to wear anymore. It was late autumn, cold enough that the air outside the car felt clean, and the stars looked like the last lights of a city I'd already left. Past midnight, I missed an exit. By the time I realized the next turnoff promised local roads, I took it. The highway rose behind me like a closed gate. My GPS decided to be helpful at the worst possible moment. The screen stuttered, zoomed, then locked onto a colorless thread, bending away from everything familiar. The name of the road blinked, jittered, and settled on one word: hello. I laughed once. It sounded too loud. Then the gaslight nudged on. 15 miles too empty. 12. The 2-lane dipped into trees that leaned close, like tall men guarding a secret. Houses appeared in threes, then in pairs, then single silhouettes with porches that sagged toward the dirt. Mailboxes leaned like they had opinions. Somewhere, a dog barked, and then remembered the rule of this place and stopped. The sign came up too fast, flat against the beam of my headlights. Welcome to Hallow EST, 1873. The EST looked confident. The year looked tired. Main Street announced itself by not being wide enough to be two-way. On the left, 5 storefronts stared with glassless eyes. On the right, a diner shaped like a railcar with a neon sign that buzzed one letter at a time. Eat. The A dropped out, then returned. The T faltered, then flared. I rolled past a barber shop with a pole still turning. I didn't see a motor. I didn't see anyone. I did see the gas station at the end of the block. One pump, one light, a halo in an otherwise thoughtful darkness. I coasted in, killed the engine, and listened to the silence press close. Suspense build up. The man at the station. The office door hung open in a way doors do when they stopped caring who comes through. A bell above the frame waited without hope. I stepped in, and the bell made a sound too polite for this place, one clean chime. Inside smelled like old rubber, mouse-nibbled cardboard, and the last breath of yesterday. The counter held a register from a decade that would look handsome in a museum display. Behind it, a man in a canvas jacket sat with his boots up on a crate, a newspaper open to the obituaries. He didn't look up. Sorry, I said. Ran low. Do you? We don't sell gas after midnight, he said. His voice didn't need me in order to exist. He kept reading. I glanced at the pump. The price wheels all read 0. I can pay cash. I tried. That's not what I said. I waited. He licked his thumb, turned a page, and folded the paper exactly in half. Town sleeps light, he said. Best to be on your way. Which way is that? I asked. He smiled, without showing teeth. Whichever way you came. I stepped back into night and felt a small relief that had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with fresh air. That's when I heard the radio, not mine. From inside the office, a short wave crackled a phrase: to clear, not to hear. He's here. I turned. The man hadn't moved. His eyes were on the obituaries. He said, "Roads tangle after midnight. Don't argue with them. I got in my car and didn't argue. I drove. The loop that wasn't the first left took me past a church with a steeple that leaned as if listening to the ground. The second took me by a schoolhouse with its clock hands stripped clean. The third brought me back to Maine, at the diner again. The neon spelled E.T., this time like the town had eaten the A on purpose. I tried a right, then another, then a straight shot out past a row of houses, all painted the same stubborn gray. Each route delivered me back to the same intersection, the same lamppost, the same billboard that read "Welcome Back Holidays Festival, Oct. 31. It was not October 31st. The banner didn't care. I parked in front of the diner because sometimes you stop running the maze and sit down. The bell over the door jangled so cheerfully I almost smiled, which made what I saw next feel worse. Every booth was occupied by people who didn't lift their heads. A woman with a scarf tied in a 1950s bow stared at her coffee as if it were a lake. A man in a work shirt gripped his fork so hard his knuckles went bone white. A girl in a prom dress with dirt touched to the hem sat with her back to the door. A sheriff's hat rested on the counter beside no one. "Kitchen's closed," said a voice from nowhere. Then why, I began, and stopped. Because the woman in the scarf turned her head a fraction. Her eyes had the cloudy glaze of fish on ice. Her lips parted, dust lifted from them. "You made it," she said, in a voice that hadn't been used in years. The prom girl turned. Her face was wrong only because it was too perfect, like a photograph smoothed by a hand. She smiled the way a person smiles when they're trying to remember how. "We've been waiting," she said. The sheriff's hat slid an inch. I didn't see a hand move it. I backed into the door. The bell didn't ring. My palm met with where glass had just been. The windows were boarded now from the inside. No nails, no hammer, just the sudden, confident reality of boards. "Sit," the workshirt man said, and the word came out in two pieces. "I can't stay," I said. It sounded small, a child's refusal in a big room. The booths stood up as one thing, their occupants rising slowly, each movement the memory of a movement. Their mouths opened together and released a low, vibrating note that made my ribs itch. It grew until the ceiling shook dust into the neon, and then, just as my breath started to cut short and the edges of my sight went gray, the sound snapped off. I was standing in the street, the diner behind me boarded and empty, the bell above the door a small black dot. My hand still held in the air a useless shape of pushing. Names that don't fade. I don't remember deciding to walk. I do remember the way the town's air tasted. Iron, the way pennies taste when you re-10 and curious, and the sweetness of leaves that shouldn't still be on trees. Street by street, Hallow showed me rooms through broken windows, a barber chair with one dark stain shaped like a country that never existed, a toy store with tin soldiers lined up against the glass, as if they'd been called to attention in the middle of the night, a doctor's office with a ledger left open on a desk. I stepped through the doctor's door because the room felt like it knew my name. The ledger said, "Patients, Hallow Clinic," in hand-inked letters, each with a small flourish, like someone who respected the alphabet had written them. I flipped pages, names, dates, treatments that belonged to a time when you measured fever with your palm. On the last page, October 31st, "You're not written," the hand assumed I knew. 5 names, the last 3 smudged away as if the page itself had exhaled and moved the ink. The first to legible, Fletcher, Mark, not released row, May not released under the list, a note in a smaller hand. Do not discharge. The town must keep count. A shadow moved across the page, not from a lamp, from the sense of someone leaning over my shoulder to read with me, their breath cold as forgotten water. I'm leaving, I said to the room, and the ledger shut itself with a tired clap. On the way out, I saw the telephone on the wall, not the black rotary from movies older, a wooden box with a brass bell and a mouthpiece like the snout of a creature. As I passed, it rang once, twice, then a third time, like a metronome for a song I didn't want to hear. I didn't answer. I walked faster. Climax, scary moment, the siren and the court. At the end of a side street with no houses, a building squatted like a thought someone didn't want. Brick, no windows on the ground floor. A sign over the door, Town Hall, 2 words with too much gravity. The door opened when I looked at it. Inside, a long room, benches, a raised platform with a chair no one should sit in unless everyone else says it's okay. The air was warmer in here and smelled like paper that had been folded and unfolded until it learned your fingerprints. A bell struck somewhere close 1 to 3 and, with the third, people filled the benches, not from doors, not from behind me, from the act of blinking, empty, full. Most wore their era the way a person wears sleep still on their faces. A mother with a hat pinned too tightly. A boy with suspenders that pulled his shoulders small. A man with a tie from a decade that never stops trying. They looked at me and then passed me to the chair. They were relieved. They were resigned. From the side door, a woman entered. She was normal enough to be terrifying. No costume, no effect. A town clerk in the dress code of anywhere. Navy skirt. Her hair was the color hair is when a person hasn't decided whether to call it brown or chestnut. She smiled the way librarians smile when you return a book on time. You drove in late, she said. We worried you'd miss the sitting. I didn't come here to sit. You came here because you were asked, she said, and because you were lost. We're considerate. We invite the lost in before the road takes all of them. Invited, I repeated, feeling how thin the word could be. She glanced at the benches. People raised their hands without moving their arms. The air lifted their fingers. It looked like seagrass in shallow tide. We keep order, she said. Hello is what it is, because we count names, steps, arrivals, departures. We do not like to be in debt. I don't owe you anything. You used our road, she said. You breathed our air. You asked our pump for mercy. I paid, I said, and the room recognized the truth in that. Every head turned, not toward me, but toward the door, as if money had just come through it. The clerk's smile softened. We won't keep you, she said. That isn't what we do. We only ask for balance. What kind of balance? I asked. Yours, she said. Behind her, the chair at the front of the room grew taller by an inch, then sank. It wasn't a trick of sight. The wood had a pulse. It remembered being a tree. Sit, she said, not unkindly. I sat. It was not a throne. It was a chair that had listened to more regret than most. The room shifted, benches finding a new slope. The clerk opened a book that might have been the town's spine. She read names, old ones, new ones, mind, then closed it with the certainty of a door. Go to the circle, she said. Everyone stood and didn't move. The door I hadn't seen behind the platform was open now, and stairs led down into a coolness that would have been pleasant in July, but wasn't now. The clerk went first. I followed, because I had the sense that not following would be a choice someone else would make for me. The basement was the size of the town, or felt like it. Brick curved into arches like ribs. At the center, a circle of white laid into the floor. Not chalk, salt, the kind that keeps things honest. "Step in," the clerk said. "What happens if I don't?" She looked at me the way a doctor looks at a patient who asks whether the medicine will taste bad. "Then it's messier." I stepped in. The salt was colder than the concrete. The air outside the circle thickened like breath against glass. Shapes gathered at the edgiest crowding without touching A's. If 100 people had come to a window to look at a single candle. I recognized the woman from the diner. I recognized the prom dress. I recognized the man at the pump by the way he didn't look up. "Name," the clerk said. I told her. "Reason for arrival." "Lost." "Reason for leaving." "Found," I said, "because sometimes one word is braver than many." The clerk nodded, as if she had expected a different answer and liked this one better. She opened her pen. It didn't need ink. She wrote on the air in front of her, and the letters stayed. "Hello," she said to the crowd. "Does anyone object?" A sound moved through the room. Not yes, not no. A shift. A communal decision, the way a flock turns without colliding. The clerk smiled small, pleased. "Balance due," she said. "Two things." "What are they?" "First," she said, "you don't take shortcuts anymore. You don't argue with the long way. The long way keeps you alive." "Done," I said, and the salt under my shoes cracked like ice. "Second," she said, and the room leaned in. "You'll remember us as if it were a story." "That's not a payment," I said. "That's a mercy," she said. "We are kind when we can afford to be. Go." The circle opened between my feet like a blink. The floor didn't drop. It moved. The room turned away from me, and the stairs toward me. The clerk stepped aside, and the crowd stepped back, making a path the way sea makes a path for a boat when it likes the boat. I climbed. At the top, night had invented morning-thin light at the edge of the street, a promise of color where the sky pretends to be gray. The town smelled like wet stone and metal cooling. The gas station's lamp was out. The barbershop pole had stopped. The diner's sign spelled nothing. I got in my car. The engine started immediately, the way an animal stands up when it hears a person it loves. The GPS lit and decided to be helpful again. The map showed me exactly where I was, nowhere, and exactly where to go away. I drove. I checked the mirror once. Hallow was there and wasn't. The sign still stood. "Welcome to Hallow." The backside was blank. The letters had never been printed. Resolution. 20 miles later, I pulled into a real station with clean glass and a bored attendant who said hey without looking. When I handed him cash, he hesitated. "You burn yourself?" he asked. Across my palm, faint and pink, like the aftermath of pressure, 4 words sat where lines should be. "You kept your way." By morning, they faded. By afternoon, I wasn't sure I could find the turnoff if I tried. When I typed Hallow into the map app, it offered me Hollow Creek, Hallows Eve costume, Hallows Church. It did not offer me where I'd been. Weeks later, a padded envelope arrived in my mailbox with no return address. Inside, a postcard. The photo showed Main Street, at dusk diner on the left, barbershop on the right, banner across the road that read Hallow Days Oct. 31. The back had no message, only a postmark smudged into a suggestion and a stamp that looked like it had been used by a hand with no heat. "I don't take shortcuts anymore. I don't mock detours." I pull over when the map behaves like a child. And if I ever pass a town whose sign says welcome in letters that look tired, I keep going. Some places want you inside because they're lonely. Hallow wants you inside because it keeps count. If you think this was only a story, ask yourself why you just checked how much gas you have. Outro: lingering mystery ghost towns die, haunted towns manage. They keep clocks without hands. They keep ledgers when computers forget. They learn the names of the lost and give them back if the balance can be paid. I don't know how many roads empty into Hallow at night. I only know I was one, and that I left with the long way inside me like a new organ. If you ever feel a town choose you, if the streets repeat where they shouldn't, if a door opens when you only looked at it, if the salt lines someone else drew feel suddenly important, be polite. Step where you're asked. Don't bargain with the circle. And when you're told to remember it as a story, do exactly that. It's the only way out. The docent takes something you can grow back. Call to action. Would you have stepped into the circle? Have you ever driven into a place that rearranged itself to keep you? If a town you'd never heard of appeared under your tires tonight, what would you do? Keep going or stop and listen? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more true style hauntings told exactly like this, subscribe. The roads are long. I'll ride shotgun.